Hi, I'm Sheila Layton. Welcome to the Beyond Coincidence Show, where every moment holds a miracle and we talk about seeing the hand of God in our lives. Call it a God wink or a tender mercy or whatever you want. Everyone on this show has seen the hand of God or their higher power in their lives in a very real and personal way. Welcome, everyone. I have a really beautiful, amazing guest with me today, and her name is Juliette. I just am going to tell you a little bit about Juliette, and then we'll get started on her experience. Juliette Berkabile is a proud fourth-generation Nevadian from Las Vegas. She has built a life filled with love, family, and education. She shares her life with her husband, Stephen, and their 10 children in a beautiful blended family. Juliette holds a bachelor's degree in elementary education and early childhood education from Southern Utah University. With her background as a teacher and personal trainer, she continues to work as a substitute teacher. She is a former Mrs. Nevada, United States. Juliette is a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So welcome, Juliette.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm just super excited to hear your story, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to chat with me. So, Juliette, tell me a little bit about what life looks like for you today. How many kids are still at home, and what does it look like?
So my husband and I have 10 children together. I had 6, he had 3, and we had an ours, and he is 10. So our oldest is 35, our youngest is 10, and I only have one at home right now. Our one that was closest to him is 19, and she just left on a mission for our church to Portland, Oregon, Spanish speaking.
That's awesome. So you just have one little caboose at home. I know what that feels like. We had a 8.5-year gap before our youngest. And so he spent a lot of time with just my husband and I, which is actually kind of fun after a busy, crazy life, I'm sure, with that many kids.
Yes, it's like he's an only child with 9 half siblings. It's a very odd situation. Yes.
Yeah, but he probably feels so loved, I'm sure.
He does. And we also have 6 grandchildren and one on the way. So we always have a very busy house. Lots of them live here locally in Las Vegas. And so they do come over quite often and visit.
That's the fun part, isn't it? The grandkids are it's so awesome. So how often do you said you do some substitute teaching. How often do you do that?
I work a couple times a week, just depending on my schedule. If somebody asks me, I might do a full week of substituting. I was working full time as a first grade teacher before I had my youngest son.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So you just keeping real busy with life and work and all the things.
And work and everything. Yep.
Yeah, which is great, right? We don't want to be bored. We want to be busy, and this is good. And there's time to be bored when we're 80. So that'll be okay.
For sure.
Juliette, tell me what life was like growing up in your home. Did religion play a part? How many siblings? All that sort of thing.
So my mother was a convert to the church, and my father had been raised in the church, but not very actively.
So you're talking the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
right? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yes, my mother converted when she was in college. Okay. And I was raised in kind of a non-traditional style home. I mean, I did have both parents there. I was the youngest of 4 by quite a lot. And my mother owned a costume shop here in Las Vegas. And so from the time I was 2 years old, she had started this costume shop, and she had raised some money babysitting. My dad had some cancer, and she was worried she wouldn't be able to support herself. And so she opened a store. And in those days, I mean, you're thinking many, many years ago, it's before the internet. And so we had all of the people from the Las Vegas Strip and different entertainers coming in to get costumes, makeup. And so that was kind of unconventional because I was raised morning till night in a costume store with very diverse and unique people coming in all the time. My father owned a dry cleaners. He did have Hodgkin's lymphoma, but he did recover from that. So he just passed away a few years ago. But my mother had her shop until she was, until I was well into my 20s.
Wow, good for her.
Mm-hmm.
Good for her, because you're like, in those days, there wasn't the internet, so she just had to put it out there and market it somehow, and, good for her to be that independent and do that. So did you say that your dad was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or no?
He was. His mother was active. His father was not active in the church. And so we were kind of Sunday-style Mormons, meaning we would go to church on Sunday, and then we would go out to dinner, and then we would go to the mall, and then it was very loose. Like, I never attended. In our church, we have a program for teenagers called seminary. I never attended seminary. Nobody asked me to go. If you asked me then, were we active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I would have said yes. But in hindsight, I realized we weren't highly active in the church. We were kind of loosely living in it.
Yeah, like you said, you went on Sunday and participated in the Sunday
Oh
activities.
yeah.
Did you participate in any of the youth weeknight activities as a
Yes,
teenager?
I was active in that way.
So
Yes.
you kind of learned the gospel through other people then, not really through being taught at home.
No, we never, I don't remember having a family home evening or anything like that. But my parents were very, very good examples of generosity and kindness and love. My father was extremely gentle. He always helped people around him. So was my mother in a more kind of fierce way. She would always help people bring in costumes, like if they needed money, and she would buy them. And so I learned kind of this unique way to serve and help others that was kind of unique in its style. It wasn't real traditional to the way maybe you would through the church, but it was very common to me to be serving in kind of unconventional ways.
Yeah, but I think that's cool. Like your mom and dad taught you through example about service. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do service, right? They
Right.
showed, and you obviously picked up on that, right? Like you noticed, you're like, wow, mom and dad are super generous and kind to other people. And so did you develop that sort of same service attitude in your life?
I did, but I don't believe that it came till later. I don't feel like there was a lot of teaching going on in my home. I actually was pregnant with my first child at the age of 16. And so I got married as a junior in high school.
Oh,
I
you got
moved out
married
of
at
high
that age.
school. Yes, the father of the child, he was my husband for 17 years. He was a year older. And so there just was never any talk about that was wrong or right. Like it just happened. And so people often will say, "Oh, you talk about your experience like it's, I don't know if I'd want to talk about it." And it's like, well, my life is like a series of embarrassing moments. So like if we're going to not talk about those things, then we're not going to be able to talk.
Right.
Because it started out very young, and my mother being a convert to the church, she was very socially engaged in it, and so she was very embarrassed by the fact. It wasn't like a teaching moment like, oh my goodness, this isn't how we're supposed to do this. It was more like, hide behind the rack of clothes at the store. I'm very embarrassed by your predicament. And she did not want me to get married. My father was more quiet about it, and I did get married. I got my GED. I moved with my new husband at 17 to Southern Utah University, where he played baseball, and I started college right away.
Now, was he a member of any faith tradition at
He
all?
was also a member of the LDS Church.
Okay. So I mean, wow, Juliette, but I think when you say, your life is full of a bunch of embarrassing moments, everybody has stuff. And I think maybe back in, 35 years ago when you got pregnant, culturally in the church, we did hide things.
Mhm.
I feel like the narrative is changing and we're much better about just accepting people for who they are, for their journey, for their path, and just loving them. Or I hope we are, that we're, that I think nowadays, if a young girl gets pregnant, it's like, okay, what's the plan moving forward? We love you. We're going to support you. We're going to help you. Was there ever any thought of adoption, or did you just always know I want to keep my baby?
There was talk about that, but I was very strong-willed in the way that I was going to keep the child. It wasn't really a question in my life of how this was going to go. And looking back, we were like two little sparrow birds, in this hurricane.
Yeah.
But we just moved forward, and that's one thing that I've really seen in my life is I'm just always ready to like move forward, and whatever happens, there's not really a lot of thought about moving back or what we're going to do or how we're going to do it. We got married and we just started our life together.
But good for you, because I feel like that's a gift. Some people can just really stay stuck in a situation. And it sounds like you're the kind of person that doesn't stay stuck. You're just like, okay, what's our next step? Let's just get this going.
How do we fix this? How do we move forward? Yeah. So
Yeah, which I think is a gift,
it
because
is.
not everybody can do that. So good for you. So, okay, how would you say then? So that was pretty rocky start to a marriage, and you were very young, and he's going to school. So you weren't going to college at that time
No,
then?
I started immediately.
Oh, you did? Now, was
Right.
the baby
Yes.
already born?
I had a 4-month-old baby and I started college, and I finished in 5 years. And I was pregnant with my fourth child when I finished with my degree in elementary education. My husband at the time, he played baseball. He actually went on and played a little bit of minor league baseball. He did not graduate from college. But as a young couple, there was a lot of pressure to start, earning money and doing this. And so he had worked at a call center there that was quite like a telemarketing call center. That was quite common for college students to do that. And him being kind of that entrepreneurial spirit, decided that he wanted to open his own telemarketing business. And so he didn't finish college, and he as I was graduating from college with my fourth child, I had been a single parent quite a lot of that time with him playing baseball. So I would always have a gaggle of babies, pregnant, trying to finish school or nursing in a bathroom stall somewhere. It was always kind of one of those situations. But that was kind of where, so like, yes, getting pregnant as a teenager is a hard thing. But in my scope, that was like a very minimal thing after kind of what we had ended up going through.
Yeah. So during that time in college and young marrieds, were either of you going to church at the time, or was it kind of?
I can say at this point I have never wavered from that. That was never an issue. That was never a question. I don't even know why. It was just always very instilled in me, and I don't know how, and I don't know why. Nobody ever talked about going to college, and nobody ever talked about continuing on in the gospel, but it's what I did, and my siblings all did as well. So as much as I'm not sure how it happened, it did happen in some organic way.
Though, Juliette, I really do believe that, for you, like you say, I don't really know how I stayed active. But again, I think it's one of those spiritual gifts. And I've talked to a few guests about this before, because I've just realized that in my own self that, 60, like to realize that I have the gift to believe. And it sounds like you did too. Like you said, nobody really talked about it. You just felt compelled to go. You weren't questioning. You didn't fight it. You just felt, and I know that that's a spiritual gift, because everyone is not like that. And the more people that I talk to on this podcast, the different struggles they have, the questions they have, they leave the faith, they come back. It's a spiritual gift. So you have the gift to believe, because otherwise you wouldn't probably have continued to go, like you say, probably a lot by yourself, because your husband was gone traveling and whatnot. So, I hope that you recognize that as the gift that it was.
I do. And I was probably the more active person in that, just mindfulness and all of that in that relationship. I tend to see that even with my children, that are married. I'm like, there's kind of always one that's pushing the other one a little bit more. And so I would say that I was the driving force in maintaining a relationship with the church and within the gospel.
Yeah. And so you had 4 kids pretty close together then. If you had 4 kids in 5 years.
Yeah, so I ended up having 6 in 12 years. So a little backstory. So at that point, I had finished college. We had, my husband at the time had started his business, this telemarketing business. And initially it wasn't very successful, and he had a business partner there, and it was in Cedar City. And he found a way to make this business successful. And we were living at that time in Enoch, Utah. Well, him and his partner had a falling out. We moved to St. George, Utah, and his partner stayed in Cedar City, and we broke apart. And at that point, we moved to St. George, Utah. He had a thriving business. He had over 1,000 employees. We were young at this time, and he was making a lot of money doing these telemarketing programs. We lived in a very large home in St. George in the Washington fields out there. I remember having this feeling of like, this all feels like too much. Like, this house feels too big. And I would kind of, if I ever questioned that, it's like, well, isn't this what you want? Isn't this what we're supposed to do? And it was like, well, yeah, but I like the nice things, but like, it never felt quite right.
And you were young. Like you said, if you were like 25 years old, you're living a lifestyle that most people don't ever receive. But if they do, they're in their 50s, right? Not in their 20s.
And I would say I was naive to the kind of lifestyle we even had. I remember being at Costco and calling my husband at the time and being like, can I buy this stuff? It's like this much money. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. And I probably had this huge bank account sitting there. Like, I was very naive in the business aspect. I was just very devoted to raising those kids, to, I was big into exercise. I've always been very big into exercise. I was not working at this time.
And you had 6 kids by this time. You had all 6 of your children?
When we moved, I had 5 at that time. There was an issue with one of his call centers. So this is when telemarketing was at its height. George W. Bush was the president of the United States, and he had put this thing out called, it was kind of against telemarketing. He was kind of coming down on telemarketers. And if you weren't in that business, you wouldn't even know this. But some of his programs that he was running came into question by the Federal Trade Commission. And so he was plugging along. He had call centers around the country and some in other countries. And one day, he called me. He was out of town, and he said, "Don't go down to the office. Something's going on." And this was kind of this pinnacle point in our life. I just lived my day as though I was any other day. I had a newborn baby. It was number 5. And the Boy Scouts were coming over that night to do an activity. I was at, for the little Boy Scouts, I was the cub leader. So I lived on this beautiful property with these big gates, and the mothers start bringing their kids. And all day I kind of kept peeking out the window. There was just this unsettled feeling. And they came in, and I started talking to the little boys. Their moms hadn't even pulled out of the driveway yet. And I started actually talking to them about the government and like how the government's run and all of these things. And all of a sudden I look out and I just see all these black like SUVs and Marshall cars and just storm my yard.
And you've got all these little cubs at your house now.
A newborn baby, 4 other kids, and all these little boys. Their mothers, I can't even imagine. They're probably sitting there wide-eyed and like, what is going on? And so these men they come through the door. They just blew through it. They didn't knock it down, but they blew through it with screaming, telling nobody to move. So our business had been raided, and our home was raided hours later, but nobody had told me that was going to happen.
So you were completely blindsided by this.
Yes, completely blindsided. And so I had asked, there was somebody holding me with like a gun full on to my head. And I'm like,
what? They came in with guns?
Guns ablazing, screaming, running through the house, like a full raid.
Were they looking for your husband?
He's out of town. Like, yeah. Of course I'm doing this by myself. That's how it always goes, right?
Oh.
So they let the little boys leave. Thank heavens. The moms took the little boys. The company that they were looking for this was right after 9/11. So you have to kind of put in to the time. And it was after 9/11, and you couldn't like book a hotel room or anything unless you had a credit card. Well, that was before debit cards were a thing. So it's not like, well, why would you just use a debit card? That wasn't in existence yet. And so people with bad credit couldn't get a debit card or a credit card. They couldn't get a credit card. So he had this program where you were given a Visa. It was a Visa logo card, and then they could like build credit through this program, basically.
So was that illegal to do at that time?
No, that was not illegal. I would say it was cutting edge, but it was not illegal. And they thought that he was printing cards in the home or something. Like they were looking for something that didn't exist. So they were looking for like a card printing machine. So after they ran through the house all afternoon, they ended up taking like a computer, which at that time nobody was really using computers for anything. And they didn't find what they were looking for. The business that my husband at the time had owned was just selling this product. He wasn't even like fulfilling the product. He was like a salesperson for this product. So needless to say, that was a disaster. And you had asked one question as how did you see the Lord's hand in some of these things? And I kind of have these points that happened. I did write a book highlighting this, and it really helped me organize this pathway that kind of led through it, this thread. And I just remember the next morning, he still wasn't home, and I heard the newspaper like hit on the front porch. And I look, and it's a picture of my house, and it says like this company is being investigated for fraud and all of these things. And I was like, my stomach just sank. And the next thing I know, there's a knock on my door, and I'm like, I don't even want to answer this door. But I opened it, and it was 2 sisters from our church. I don't remember who they were or anything. They must have been my a visiting type teacher or something like that. And they said, we don't care what's happening. We just want to know if you're okay.
Oh, that's super sweet of them, hey?
Yeah, and I just remember.
You don't even remember who that even was at that point.
I couldn't tell you. It might have been 2 angels. Like, I don't even know.
You were probably so stressed.
It still brings like some emotion to me. Just that was a point where I just had to start making some decisions in my life. I didn't know that at the time, but I had to start making some decisions. Like, I had a nail appointment that day. Do I go to the nail appointment? Do I show up, or do I hide in my house?
Right.
And I went to the nail appointment, and I set this precedence in my life where I'm going to show up for everything, and
I'm not going to hide from this.
One embarrassing moment. Here we are. So at that point, the company was shut down there. The federal prosecutors from the Federal Trade Commission were horrible. And what happens is you get put under a receivership. That's this third party while an investigation's going on. So they're supposed to pay for your home, pay for your cars, manage your funds. Well, that's not really what happens. They basically collect all the money, pay themselves, and then give the federal agencies what's left over, which is like kind of nothing. So it became very personal. I remember moving out of that home. It was a huge home. It was like 11,000 square feet. And my sister and I packed up the moving.
How much time had passed from the raid to the time you had to move?
Not long, a month or so.
Oh, so it was
Maybe
really
a month,
quick.
right? Yeah, it was really fast. So my sister and I packed up this house, what we were allowed. But again, the Federal Trade Commission's they seized all our like accounts. They wanted all the furniture to remain in the home, all the bed sheets, like they took everything.
Why? Why would they want your bed sheets?
It becomes very personal. It becomes very heated. And so I would try to put dirty diapers in like things that were staying in the house, just being snarky, so.
Well, yeah. So you didn't really get to take much then.
No, it still was a lot just because I had so many kids, but yeah, so at that point I was able to really start letting go of like material things, like these things aren't important because now what's important are my kids and like freedom.
Right.
So
yeah. So where was your ex-husband through all of this? The packing, the raid?
Quite right. I'm always trying to like recollect that. Apparently he was there somewhere, but I just remember doing a lot of this by myself, or it felt as though I was doing it by myself.
And you didn't obviously have a lot of conversation with each other.
It's funny how you don't remember.
Yeah, when you're under that much trauma, there's memory loss. I get that for sure. Juliette, during this whole crazy time, were you praying like, Heavenly Father, what do I do? This is a train wreck. Like you said you were showing up, so you must have still been going to church, which probably was pretty hard.
Yes.
And people were
wasn't the hard part yet. We still hadn't really gotten to the hard parts. And so, yes, I was always still very it was almost like we're going to pray our way out of this. We're just going to be faithful and devout and all of that. And it's
your husband too, or this was just you?
Yes, it was kind of a come to Jesus for him too, I think. We have to really mind our P's and Q's. Well, on the back end, he was being shady with the government. You start getting really defiant with the government when they start coming after you in that way. We moved to Las Vegas. He didn't share a lot with me, I think just out of protection for me. And I think he thought I couldn't handle maybe the truth about what was always going on. So we moved to Las Vegas to a rental home. We later buy a smaller home in Las Vegas. And this kind of all just settles down. He starts another business here in Las Vegas. It's running fine. Several years go. And this is still in the backdrop, but nothing's really happening or occurring.
So he's moving forward with some kind of a business, something different, obviously.
Yes.
And you're just raising kids and having another baby.
Yes, I have another child at this time. There was issues in our marriage kind of continually that were always kind of, it was a rocky marriage, just to say. Of course, I was very traditional and conservative in my marital views, and you kind of work it all out at all costs. But there was a lot of issues with feeling safe
and trust issues, right?
Trust issues, fidelity issues. There was some stuff. And so this is when I ran for Mrs. Nevada, and I won that title, and I went on to Mrs. United States. And when I won that title, it was a huge pageant. There was all these women in it. And some of the stuff started bubbling up. Some of the other contestants were like, hey, we found this stuff on her. And the director's like, this isn't you, this is him, and you're fine, whatever. So, but we were we were kind of public figures here in Las Vegas, and that had been very public in Utah. So all of a sudden there's this period of time where you can't indict somebody after it's a statutory limitation. So within 7 years, you better figure it out or the case goes away. So it was 6 years, 11 months, and 3 weeks. I mean, it was like that. And this federal prosecutor had gone around the country. And because this was telemarketing, it's different states. So that's what makes it federal. I've learned a lot about all these systems.
I bet you have.
Yes, I'm I could almost be an attorney. And so he found this district court judge that took this case in the District of East St. Louis. So at that point, this was 2006, 2007, he was indicted, and we had to go to trial in the District of East St. Louis. And so this was that
one district court judge in the whole country.
Yeah.
At the last minute was like, I'm going to indict this guy.
Yes, on fraud. It was basically the charges were fraud. So here we go again. The stuff's all still frozen. All this stuff's happening. The church is very supportive. We're very active in our church at this time. And again, I would say I was probably more active in my mind and my heart. There were some signs probably that I should have kind of caught on. Like, for example, in our church, we go to the temple and you have to have a specific little card, like a get into the temple card, a temple recommend. And I would show up with mine and he'd say, oh, I forgot mine at home. I got to go get it. And so there was some stuff going on in his life that he wasn't reconciled with that I just kind of turned a blind eye to, or maybe was just naive to. So we end up getting an attorney that was not the right kind of attorney. He was like he defended like murderers and things like that. We needed like a specific kind of attorney. But the federal government kept like freezing the accounts and taking the retainers back from the attorneys, and it made it very difficult for us to defend ourselves, or for him to defend himself. So we had this attorney. We moved to the district of East St. Louis. We took all our kids. We moved in a sense, like we got an apartment there for like a month because the trial was going to last this like extended period of time.
So you took your whole family.
We took the kids. There's all these things that you do when you're on trial. You take the kids in at certain times and you take them out. You wear specific clothing and you style your hair a certain way. And we had hired all these people to tell us like how to do this. We also hired a shadow jury. So they sit there, they listen, you don't know who they are. They sit in the audience and they say if they're going to convict you or not, and how it's kind of how the arguments are setting with the people.
So that stuff you see on TV is kind of true.
It kind of is true. And so we were there.
Did you feel God's presence through a lot of this, or did you feel a little bit alone?
No, during this time, I felt 100% sure that this was the hardest thing we were ever going to go through. This was the hardest thing. And we were just such good Christians, and we had really tried hard to be good and praying and all of the things. So we were going to be saved from this.
Now, do you think that was a feeling you were getting from the Lord, or was it just what you wanted?
The feeling I was getting from the Lord was that it's going to be okay.
Oh, that it's going to be okay. But you didn't know.
I took it was, this is going to be over after this trial. We're going to move on. I'm going to everything's going to be fine. After this trial, this is the trial. This is the hard part, right?
Right. So you were kind of misinterpreting that, right?
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing you say? Is that you thought this will be over and he's going to be okay?
Yes.
But the Spirit was really saying to you, Juliette, in the end, you will be okay. So you kind of felt at peace, even though you were misreading the message.
Yes, and I'm a very impatient person, and so I assume that Heavenly Father's the same way. He's like, okay, we're going to fix this, and we're going to fix that, and everything's going to be fine. But now, through all of these hardships and experiences, I realize that he's real slow. It is a slow process of we are like going to work through it. And the one thing else I've learned is like Heavenly Father is never going to allow you to just go around it or under it or over it. When I teach kindergarten, I always say you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you have to go through it. You have to like go through it, and he can go with you, but you have to go through it.
Yeah. So here you've moved to St. Louis now for a month.
Yes, and our whole family's there. It cost us about $1 million, and this is in 2008. People in our families had to put up homes to get us to this trial to pay for our defense. And you have to remember, like, the federal government has an endless budget. Like, they don't have the same, you're basically guilty until you can figure it out, but it's just very hard.
It's not innocent until proven guilty. It's kind of the other way around.
Kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
If they want you, if they can, they can indict a ham sandwich. I've definitely learned that. I get asked the question a lot, well, was he guilty? I think he played on the line. He was a very gray area player, and to some degree, he probably shouldn't have been dealing with like the people he was dealing with. It's kind of a snarky, like, it's not a great business as like telemarketing. It's kind of slimy,
kind of shady. Yeah,
it's shady. So, anyways, we go through this trial. It takes like 2 weeks. I have my little kids there. My oldest is like 12. My youngest is a baby. And I really started to gain this love. I've always exercised, but like we'd be on a lunch break and I had to get to the gym. Just that was my way of like controlling some part of a situation. I always had full control over that. And my husband at the time, his dad's like, how can you go work out? I'm like, how can I not go work out? It's like,
for my mental health, I need it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, this is what I have to do to get through this. Right. So we get through the end of this, and it's not just, are you guilty or are you innocent? There's all these questions. So if you answer yes, did you do business over state lines? Yes. Was there money involved? Yes. If you answer yes to more than half of those, you're found guilty. It's this whole thing. It was all these questions.
And they're not weighted. It's not like this one's more important than this one. It doesn't matter whether, are your eyes blue? Yes. Right? Like it's just.
So they do that. The federal government does that to ensure a win, basically.
Yeah, right.
So we're sitting in this courtroom. The jury comes back. We waited like 3 days for this jury to come back. We're sitting in this old brick courthouse. And if you've ever been to the District of East St. Louis, you probably have not. It looks like World War III just happened. There's like rubble, like smoking piles of rubble, and it looks like it's completely drug infested. And we're sitting in this old courthouse, and we're sitting in this room, and this light is just like swaying, and there was an earthquake. And the Mississippi River started going the opposite direction. Sometimes during an earthquake, it'll shift directions. And so all this happened like the day that he was convicted. And so in that moment, I'm like, oh, these are like, this is going to be over. I really felt that the Spirit was like, this is going to be over. He was convicted. He was found guilty. He was considered a flight risk. They would not let him come home. So usually in white collar crime cases, they will let the person come home, get their affairs in order, like say goodbye to their family, and they go to some camp. Well, that's not how this went. They shackled him. They cuffed him. I had 6 little kids there. He got on a bus, like a van. They took him, and like we never saw him again. That.
He didn't even get to come home or say goodbye to anybody. Juliette, how was that? Watching your husband at the time be put in shackles, were you just absolutely shocked? Like, what is going on?
The shock in the whole family, like it was. So this was another one of those really pivotal, like poignant times. I go back, I see him leave in the van. We've been married like 16 years or whatever at this point. We share 6 children. We've been through all this. I'm thinking this is the end of it. It's just the beginning. And I go back to the apartment. I don't know. The kids left. They went back to Las Vegas. I don't know who took them. And I just remember laying on the bed and like wailing, like this, like full out. It wasn't even a cry. It was just like a yelling, wailing. And my sister is 16 years older than me, and she has always been there through all this. And she was holding me like in this fetal position, and we were just rocking. And I remember like going into the closet, and all his clothes are sitting there, and I'm packing up, and I'm watching the clock. And I would pray like every 30 seconds that I would live for the next 30 seconds. So I just kept this prayer, constant prayer, like please, like I just wanted to die. My glass house was just like crumbling. So we get on the airplane to go back to Las Vegas. The stewardess asks my sister, is she okay? Her face is completely disfigured. So I can't even imagine what I must have looked like for a stewardess to ask, what just happened? Like my face wasn't on my face right. Like I looked so awful.
So when you were praying, I mean, you were so distraught, but when you were praying, did you feel any peace, or were you so distraught that you just simply felt overwhelmed and alone?
I don't know. I must have felt some comfort because I didn't die.
Yeah.
I didn't kill myself.
Yeah.
Not that was I don't remember feeling suicidal. I
can't breathe.
And I was just praying to live. Like, I wasn't like asking for comfort. I was like, give me 30 more seconds of life. I just need to make it through the next 30 seconds, and then I can make it through the next and the next and the next. Like, wow. I must have done that for like 3 hours. I don't even know.
But you were just in a full-blown panic attack. Like you couldn't even, and when you have those kind of situations that are that traumatic, of course you don't remember a lot, right? Because your brain is completely shut down.
So then I see myself, I have this new bishop, which is kind of like our pastor for our church. And I go to him.
Now you come back to Las Vegas.
I come back to Las Vegas. I actually called him in the bathroom from the courthouse or the airport and said, he went to prison. I'm coming home. And he's like, okay. He's like this brand new bishop. So I come home. I talked to him about kind of what's happened, whatnot. And I said, I need to talk to the Elders Quorum, which is like our men's group. And I need to talk to the Relief Society, which is our women's group. And I said, because I need full support of these people. So this is where my like fight or flight checks in, and I start like, this is what we have to do, right?
Yeah, you just went straight into business mode.
Business. And I went to the elders quorum, to our men's group, and I said, don't talk about it. If you have any questions, ask me. Your neighbor doesn't know. If there's an answer to the question, I'll know, and I'm going to need your help because this is right. And then I went to the women and I said, nobody knows the story better than me. I'm completely open. Like, let me know what you need to know. And
good for you.
I just laid it out there.
Because you didn't need people gossiping about this.
They did. And there was a couple times I made a couple phone calls. Like, I heard you had questions. Like, what do you want to know? So this is going on. I still have my home. There is still an operating business in Las Vegas that's providing an income for me. I have a great word family, which is like our church family was very good. I had great men and women supporting, helping, loving.
Oh, that's awesome.
All of those things. And then we have sentencing. So you don't get sentenced the same time as you get convicted.
Okay. And at that point, you hadn't seen him, though, from the time
I might have seen him once or twice. He was calling. So you go from before sentencing, you go to like little jails, and then they put you in the federal system, and you don't know where that person's going to end up or anything like that.
Wow.
They don't tell you. They don't give you any information. So I go back to St. Louis for the sentencing. There's all these guidelines for sentencing, and he was given the highest sentence in the country for white collar crime.
Wow.
So if you like in Forbes magazine, there's like Bernie Madoff and then him. So this sentence was like a poster child for like, do not do this. This should have been like a slap on the hand. You're going to be
kind of used him as an example then.
Yes.
That's what it sounds like.
I've had people in law school tell me that they talk about this case.
Oh, really? About how extreme it was?
Yeah.
What he had done? They thought that
the system worked kind of in that way. Like white collar crime, first offense should have been, 5 years in a camp or something. He ended up with 33.5 years, which is a life sentence, in a high security federal prison, because if you're over 10 years, you're in a high security, you're not in a camp. So he's in with
he didn't murder somebody.
Yes. So he gets sentenced. Then I go home. There's appeal processes. There's all these things you're kind of hoping for.
But he's still not with you because, right? Yeah. He's a flight risk or whatever.
Plus, I'm going to the bishop. I'm attending our temple more often. Like I'm definitely very convicted in my faith at this time because it's kind of all I have. Like,
right.
When you get to these points where you have like the support system helping you, but like that's all you have is God. And so you have to like really cling to your faith or you go completely away from it. And I chose to cling.
Right.
So I had great support from my kids.
How did that manifest itself to you, Juliette? Like as you realized, okay, this is bad. I could be alone for the next 30 years. And you said you kind of went even deeper into your faith. What did that look like? Did you pray more intently? Did you get into your scriptures? Did you attend a temple? What did you do to sort of really feel God near you? Because how else do you go forward?
I was at the temple all the time. And I was in the bishop's office like once a week. I was constantly like asking for help, for guidance. Like I know we had been married in our temple, which is called a sealing. And so we were sealed and I'm like, we're supposed to be married for eternity because in our religion, we believe that you're married for eternity. But how am I supposed to raise 6 children for the next 30 years? Like, how am I supposed to do this? Yes, I have a degree. I can make 30 grand a year or whatever. Like I can't take care of kids. It just seemed like overwhelming.
For sure.
We had a place in Hawaii. Like we had this home that we rented out and whatnot. I was over there. I had all my kids over there. It was during the summer. This was all still going on. I get a phone call. It's a federal prosecutor. Juliette, your name is on all these businesses. You are going to be investigated by the Federal Trade Commission. You have to be in court tomorrow in Las Vegas, but all your stuff's frozen again. So I'm like, what crap? So now,
yeah, because you didn't know anything, right? Did you even know that your name was on the businesses?
I mean, I would like, not really. It was like, here, sign this. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, you didn't know what was going on because you were raising 6 kids.
So the government felt that I had opened other businesses or businesses that were in my name, and that the money from the businesses he had been indicted for had bled over to this. So now I was under investigation.
Oh,
so
well.
I have all these little kids. During this time, this is kind of a funny side story. I meet Dog the Bounty Hunter. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. He's that guy he's like I don't even know, he's on bail bonds guy. So I meet him at the gym. He's always at the gym. I'm always at the gym. He's like, tell me your story. I'm like, my husband just went to prison. Like, this is rough. And I said, I told you my story. Like, how do I capitalize on this? And he's like, he was in prison for murder, by the way. He's like, I have this reality show. I have written all these books, and that's how I've like come out on top. And he's like, call me, go home, become a personal trainer, because you obviously know what you're doing, and call me in a year. And I was like,
So do you feel like meeting him was the hand of God?
sort of. It kind of propelled us in a different way. It was just kind of this unusual thing. Like all these weird things kind of happen. So,
But don't you think that that's the way the Lord works? Like I do. I feel like when it seems really weird and out there in a good way, it's of the Lord. He's like, Juliette, you need help. This guy might lead you in a good direction. I mean, he's a random
yeah, it
guy.
took me down this very interesting like way. So I went home. I actually did that. I became a personal trainer. I was like, I had been working out since I was 16. I had worked with really great professionals. I'm under investigation. Everything's frozen again. And during this time, I am just in fight or flight all the time. Like my adrenal glands are just a mess. I'm training people from, 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. I'd come home, crash for a couple hours, go back and work. I have my parents helping me with the kids, like trying to get them to all their stuff. The house is a mess. The pool's green. Nobody's like maintaining the home. It just was like a really dark place to be. I remember having a babysitter come over she was interviewing to be help me with the kids, and she went home and told her mom, it's the saddest place I've ever been. Like I can't stay there. It's so sad. So the first thing I have to do is get back to Las Vegas and find an attorney. So I missed my court date because all my credit cards are frozen. I can't even get a flight back to Las Vegas. I make my way back there. This is one part where the Lord's hand was so obvious. I find this attorney. I interviewed with like 5 or 6. They all want $1 million. I don't have $1 million. My ex-husband's family put some money up. We got a retainer to this guy, and he was a Federal Trade Commission attorney. And he was apparently like a Rolls Royce, because when we would go in for where they like talk to you, the federal government would say, how are you affording him? How are you affording this attorney? He is the Rolls Royce of attorneys. And he would say, like, don't worry about how she's affording me. Just you worry about you, kind of thing. And it's
So
funny
he trusted you then. He must have trusted you.
he was literally placed in my life by the hand of God, 100%. He never asked for any more money. Come to find out, he's like $800 an hour. He works for one of the biggest firms in the country out of Washington, D.C.
Wow.
He took care
of exactly what you needed.
Exactly what I needed. I ended up, one day he's like, so how are you living? And I'm like, I don't know. And he said, until you completely turn everything over and be honest 100%. Because at this time, I'm like, I've got to keep like some cash under the mattress and some jewelry and this and that. He's like, until you stop doing all that, this isn't going to go away. So the next day I brought everything and I laid it. I said,
how do I feed my family?
How do I feed my family? He's like, that will happen. He was a member of our faith. It's funny. I've never heard about him before. Nobody knows him. And I've never heard another thing about him since. It was like, and he basically got me off the hook. However, this went on. I lost my home. I had no money. I was doing my personal training stuff. I was doing like all the, you have to go sit with the investigators and talk to them, and you have to like disclose everything. And it's very time consuming. It's not a short thing. In the meantime, I was going into my bishop, didn't know what to do. And one day he said, he was a very quiet, like composed man. And he said, the next time you talk to your husband, ask him if he has anything moral that he needs to. That was a Sunday. He called from the prison. I said, do you have something you need to talk to me about? And he said, yeah. And he had been having an affair with a very good friend of mine, my best friend, actually. And at that point, that was a gift too, because it was a way out at that point. It was a way to say, okay, this can't be fixed. I don't want it fixed at this point. You've watched me for a year sit and struggle in this and didn't tell me about this. I'm good.
So how long at this point had he been in prison? How long at this point now?
About a year.
Okay.
About a year. So that was kind of one of those divorces where he's there, I have full custody, I get anything that's left, home, but I have nothing left. So at this point, I'm living on food stamps. I'm living on church welfare. I'm living on the kind hearts of people around me. I would always go walk straight into church, sit on that front row. Somebody said, "Oh, you're such an amazing girl. You go sit on the front row." It's like, because I'm crying every week. Like, I'm sobbing and I just don't want people to see me because this is horrible, horrible. So get divorced. Now I have to start dating. Never dated. I have never dated because I got married when I was 17 years old, had the baby at, that was
You're
a
like,
disaster.
oh crap, now I have to date. Oh dear.
And I was on medication to stay awake. I was on medication to go to bed. I was on medication to deal with my anxiety. I was going into the hospital sometimes because my adrenals had just been burnt out. And plus my kids are going through all these they just lost their dad. We're living in people's homes on their couches. Like, we're homeless. One day I ran inside. I had the car running outside. I look out the window and they're repossessing it. Like, it was one thing after another.
So you went from 11,000 square foot house to homeless in a couple of years. Yeah.
Yes. So I start dating. My sister is selling her house. She has this realtor come by and the realtor says, "What can I do? How can I help you?" And she said, "Sell my house and find my sister a husband because I'm sick of taking care of her." And my sister and her husband were amazing. I mean, they'd go to Costco and I had all the support, but I didn't love being taken care of by other people.
Well, of
course.
I was
a black hole of sucking everyone's energy. So, and I knew that. I knew it. I hated it. So I meet this guy's brother-in-law. So this guy calls his brother-in-law and says, "Hey, I'm trying to sell this lady's house. Can you take out this lady?" But the catch is she has 6 kids. And I thought I was this prize. Like, who wouldn't want me and 6 kids? Well, nobody actually wants you.
Yeah.
And
we want you. They just maybe don't want all 6 of your kids.
And no financial. I don't get child support. Those kids don't go to their dads on the weekends. My kids spent every holiday at a federal prison with their grandparents, going all over the country, getting bit by bed bugs, dealing with those awful guards, sitting in prisons over Easter break, Christmas break. Like, they had a hard go of things too.
Yes.
So they're it's been rough. So anyways, I start dating this man. He's so sweet, so nice, but I'm a disaster.
And he's your sister's realtor's
brother-in-law. Yes,
brother-in-law. Okay, crazy.
So we just can't figure it out. I've been married all these years. Like, I still have my ex-husband's clothes in the closet. Like, what do you do? And during this time, I'm writing all the time. And so I'm had that connection with that Dog the Bounty Hunter guy, and I'm sending stuff to his producer. And we're working on maybe doing like a reality show. I was like trying to figure out how to capitalize and market this. And so Steven and I, that's my husband now, we end up getting married. And it was a disaster. The kids are all crying, all at the wedding, all crying because they want their dad. Like, they're little kids. They want their dad. So this is one of those embarrassing moments. We've been married 4 times. We got married 4 times and divorced and married and annulled and married. And the last one, I didn't have a house anymore. We ended up getting our house together and we went to a therapist and he basically said, "Juliette, you're a total crazy. Like, you need to let your guard down and you got to let go of that old life." And I was very afraid at this time of letting go of my food stamps, letting go of my support system. Like, how was I going to live if this person didn't step up? Not saying he wouldn't. I wouldn't even give him a chance.
Yeah, you were just so traumatized.
Yeah. And so after that, we never had another issue. It took like 1 therapy session. We never had another issue. We married, and we've been married 12 years now, and our little boy is 10. And during that time, we did film a reality show. Nothing happened with the original producer and all of that, but I was sitting on the couch and this lady calls and says, "We're looking for women in the LDS church who have like a criminal history background, and you might be good for that." And then they said, "But we're looking for an ensemble." And I said, "Well, good luck." They said, "We can't find anybody to talk to us." I'm like, "Well, most Mormon women will not. They don't like that embarrassment. They listen to their husband. Like, I'm as outspoken as they come." And so Bravo ended up producing a show for us, just for our family. And it was my ex-husband calling in from prison, all 10 kids, how we parent. It didn't get picked up, but we did end up filming it for.
And so you didn't get paid to do that then?
No, we did go through all the contracting, all of that, and then it didn't get picked up. No, but it's kind of one of those things, like, I had to, because it was presented, I felt like it had to, if it was supposed to manifest, it would, but we had to go through the process of it with whatever that looked like. And it was really fun.
You probably learned, it was probably a little bit therapeutic, wasn't it?
It was, but it was also really scary. All my older kids are like, well, are they going to find out about this? Like, you start realizing your whole life's going to be on blast. Like, everybody's going to know what you're doing all the time.
Right.
So anyways, that didn't get picked up. We have this great little CD with our family called Everybody Loves Julie or something like that. And it was really fun. They did say, we'll pick it up if you can homeschool in a trailer and be a polygamist.
You're like, no.
It's a whole different thing, people. Like, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So, no. But that was fun. And then fast forward to Donald Trump's last day in office in that, November, December. Our kids play competitive tennis. My husband, now his boys were very good, like played all.
You're talking like 4 years ago.
Yes. And my kids, there's the tennis group, and then there's this foundation that works with the kids. And the guy that runs this foundation would see letters coming in from my children's father. And they'd say how much they love him, and he would talk to my kids all the time. And Jewel, the singer Jewel, she's a singer, she works with this foundation as well. And he said, how can we help these kids, like, get their dad out of prison? And if you want to talk about miracles, this could be like a whole podcast of how this fell into place. She's like, well, I'm actually really good friends with Ivanka Trump. And it was hard. My oldest son had to prepare all these documents, and they had to go through all these legal processes in a very short period of time. Usually to get somebody to even look at getting a commutation, it costs upwards of $1 million. That's just to talk to somebody. Like, these don't happen. It does not happen. So we had to put a little video together, and it just so happened that, like, a friend's cinematography specialist was coming through town on Christmas Eve to, like, do this. Like, all of these miracles started falling in place. So it looked as though there was this group of attorneys. They're Hasidic Jews. They have a lot to do with these processes in Washington, D.C. and whatnot. They were helping. Nobody was charging anything. This all happened, like, pro bono.
And this was because these people were concerned about your children and wanted to help your kids?
They would see these letters coming in, and they're like, he seems like a really good dad. Like, he's been in prison 13 years.
Like, he'd been that long?
Yeah, 13 years, 13 and a half. Come the night of the last day of his presidential office, my kids go into this tennis foundation office, and they're sitting around at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., all day goes by. Anyway, so they're all sitting there waiting. Jewel calls. She's like, I haven't heard anything. So it's midnight in Washington, D.C., 9 p.m., and my kids have just given up hope. They're just done, and they're ready to go home. And all of a sudden,
they were sitting in this tennis office?
This tennis foundation office all together.
And what were they waiting for?
A call from Washington, D.C., somebody to say that the president signed off on this commutation.
So is a commutation meaning they would let him out of prison?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have all this on video. So about midnight, Washington, D.C. time, they get a call from Ivanka Trump. She calls all my kids. She said, my father just canceled your dad's sentence. He gets to come home tomorrow. And she talked to my kids for 20, like, they were the only people in the world. You wouldn't think that they had anything else going on. The most delightful woman I've ever seen in my life. Like, so classy. And
were you there with them in the waiting?
No, I wasn't. I was kind of on bated breath, though, like at home, waiting for this call. And so we did see the video as this was coming in. And so in this video, you just see my kids, and it's like they all got released from jail. Their prison sentence was ending. You can just see this, like, weight lift off of these kids who have carried this sentence. So, like, 1 in 4 kids have a loved one that is incarcerated. This is, like, a really big problem in our country. It's an issue. Maybe a grandma, brother, sister, mom, dad, somebody's in prison. And there's no financial support. Like, it's hard on families. It's very hard. And so, anyway, the tennis foundation loaned the kids a van. They drove to Lompoc, California the next day, and they drove home with their dad.
Wow.
And he's been home for 4 years. Well, 4 years in January.
Wow. And so does he have contact with the children?
Yes, he does. That's been a whole nother really difficult road. He did get remarried right away, pretty much. And it's been hard. I will say, people ask me all the time, like, what's the silver lining in all of this? And I would say that I got a lot of blame from my children about situational things throughout the 13 and a half years, right? Like, why did you do this? Or why didn't you do that? And now that he's out, they have this different hindsight. They're like, now we see, because when somebody's in prison, you only get the best of them, right? You get all the right answers. You get your full attention when you're visiting. They're not in the real world, like, dealing with these situations. Right. And so that's the silver lining. All of this, like, blame went away. We had a better relationship, and they've been able to try to, like, get out. They've all moved on with their lives beautifully. Like, everybody has really come out, but the after and post incarceration is a very difficult period of time.
I bet. So Juliette.
Yes. Sorry, this is long. I know it's a long story.
No, that's okay. So in the end of all of this craziness, now it's been 17 years about, right? Because he was in there for 13 and then 4. So 17 years. Over the last 17 years,
well, I would say it started in like 2006, 2005.
2006? Okay.
Yeah.
So after, all these years, would you say that because of this situation and this hard, terrible thing, scary, every emotion you could imagine, would you say that this has deepened your relationship with the Lord?
Yes, but 100%. And that's, I always testify. I want to stand, I don't want to get up in every testimony meeting. In our church, we get up once a month and we can tell and testify to the things that we know about Jesus Christ or about our Heavenly Father. And it's like, I want to get up every single week because I feel as though the miracles that I have seen, the miracles that I have witnessed, I can never deny. And I am supposed to stand at the pulpit. I am supposed to stand on the street. I am supposed to stand somewhere and say, Jesus Christ is our Savior. Heavenly Father 100% exists because I have seen these miracles in my life. There is no way that these things just happened. People do not just get out of prison. That doesn't happen.
Somebody doesn't just get married with 6 kids, right?
That was a huge one. I thought I was the prize. I was not the prize. So
yeah,
I have, and I had to go through these awful, horrible things to get to I had to go through it. I had to go through the snowstorm. I had to go through it to be where I am today. I do not miss the temple. I go every single week if possible. I am at church every week, and I want to bear witness every single day to these miracles. Why do I had so much anxiety about doing a podcast, talking about this again, because every time I'm like, I have to talk about this, but it's a way for me to bear witness that miracles happen only through Jesus Christ. And they do not happen fast. This is over decades of time, and they're still happening. I have a family of 10 children. They all get along. You would not be able to tell my stepchildren from my birth children. They are talking, communicating. We meet every other Sunday for dinner.
And that's a miracle.
That is a testament. That is a testament. They are not all in the church. No, they are not.
No. It doesn't matter. But they get along. They all get along. All 10 of those kids get along well. That is a gift from God and a miracle.
And my girls and my kids have had a man in their life who they consider their father almost more than they know him better. Like, he came into my husband now, Stephen's. I've been married to him since my baby was 3. So he raised her. Right. And they were so lucky to have somebody. What a blessing to have that stability, So I can never deny, and I have to take every opportunity to witness that he is there, even if he doesn't feel like he is there. Through this, he has been with me the entire time, and it's not been easy. It has been horribly difficult.
Oh, I can imagine. And so you've kind of answered the final question of why do you think it's important to recognize the hand of God in your life?
And some days I don't. Some days I'm like, I don't want to listen to my scriptures, or I don't want, it's that natural man. Like,
yes,
I'm always fighting the natural man because I'm and I don't want to be the crazy person that gets up and testifies every single month. But I think it's our responsibility especially as people in this church. So if you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it is your responsibility to speak about your hardships. And that's one thing we don't do very well in this church.
I agree.
Yes, I was pregnant at 16. Yes, my ex-husband went to prison. Yes, I was married 4 times. I had a daughter like all of these things happen. And now I have to talk about them so I can tell you how God got me out of those hard things. That is my responsibility.
Yes. And like you say, that is where that final question, why do you think it's important to see the hand of God in your life? Because it is your responsibility to see his hand and to recognize it and to grow from it. Does that kind of make sense?
Testify to it. We have to tell others about it. Sometimes people say, Juliette, TMI. No, listen. Hi, my name's Juliette. My ex-husband was in prison. He got out of prison. It was a miracle. I have seen miracles. Sorry if it's TMI. That's my job. God gave me these miracles so that I could tell you about them.
I 100% agree. And I agree with you that oftentimes people are afraid to share their miracles because, oh, it's too spiritual. I mean, maybe there are some, but I feel like we can so learn from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's kind of the point of this whole podcast, is being able to see the hand of God in our lives in so many different ways. And sometimes we get the miracle and sometimes we don't. And you experienced both.
Yeah. And the miracles, it's not that we don't get them. We just don't get them in our time.
Yes. Or in our way. Like we can pray for someone to be healed and they might still die. Mm-hmm. Right? We don't get the miracle that we want, but you will see God's hand somewhere else. And that's your story, right?
It's like with our big giant 10-kid family who had all these issues and have had issues with depression and suicidal thought and this and that. We still had to put in the work to create what we have. But we had Heavenly Father carrying us along the whole entire time. And the other thing that I've really learned through this is no matter how horrible your problem is, whether your cat died or you have a flat tire, that might be the hardest thing you deal with. That's hard for you. And that's okay. Like, don't ever, like I used to have women say, my problems don't seem so bad. Yeah, they are hard. Your problems are your problems and they are as hard as my problems are to me, right? And the second thing is you are not immune from problems. So if you've been sued by the Federal Trade Commission, you might get sued again. Like, there's always more problems that are going to happen. Just because you've been through something doesn't mean you're not going to go through something else.
Yeah. But your story just goes to prove the whole point of trust in the Lord, that it will be okay in the end, right? Like, you're doing great now, but it took a long time to get here. But the Lord was with you through it, and he loves you and he wants you to have joy, and you are experiencing that now. And so, Juliette, I appreciate so much you taking time today, sharing your testimony and sharing your really hard story and just letting us see where God has worked in this really hard thing, and that it took a long time, but you weren't alone.
Yep. Nope, I was not. And sometimes you do feel alone, but you never really are, and I'm a testament to that. I'm not in the psych ward, like all balled up in a corner. So that's the testament.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, thank you so much for taking time today to share that and to have revisit all those really hard things. But I really appreciate it. I love that you have taken something so difficult and rose above it and been able to see God moving. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. If you have an experience where you have seen the hand of God or your higher power in your life, I want to hear about it. Please send an email to Sheila@beyondcoincidence.com. Have a great day.